And welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's Frank Sinatra, his life and times and best hits. Frank Sinatra was one of the leading vocalists of the 20th century. He rose to fame singing alongside orchestras. In the 40s and 50s, he had a dazzling array of songs and albums and also became a prominent figure in the film industry. Some of his best hits include Love and Marriage, Strangers in the Night, and New York, New York. He grew up in New Jersey touring alongside local bands. He was inspired to take up music full-time after watching Bing Crosby perform in the mid-1930s. He recorded his debut single alongside singer Harry James in 1940. The same year, he joined Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. After a successful stint with Dorsey's orchestra, he started out solo. As a solo artist, Sinatra attained widespread fame, gaining a reputation as the voice and the Sultan of Swoon. In 1943, he also started performing in movies. Some of his best movie roles were in films like The Manchurian Candidate, From Here to Eternity, and The Man with the Golden Arm. In 1950, he founded the Reprise label, on which he released more hit singles and albums. He went on to win multiple Grammy Awards for his music. So that was a quick insight into the life and times and best hits of Frank Sinatra. More details coming up. Also coming up, some trending festival and album news. This is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We'll be right back after some music. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Frank Sinatra, his life and times and best hits. And during this hour, we're going to be talking about his biography. So Frank Sinatra was born on December 15th in New Jersey. He was later known as the Sultan of Swoon. He grew up in a tight-knit family in New Jersey. Growing up, he was inspired by the singers of the 30s. His favorite artists include Bing Crosby, and he dreamt of becoming a singer himself. His family noticed his passion for music, and they encouraged him to pursue a career in music full-time. Sinatra started out singing at family gatherings and school events where he gained experience in singing. As a teenager, he joined the music band The Hoboken Four. He would tour and perform at local venues alongside them. In 1939, he recorded his first solo hit, Our Love, alongside the Harry James Orchestra. Other songs he recorded with them included All or Nothing at All, which went on to become one of his best hits. In 1940, he joined the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra. Alongside the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, his fame rocketed, and he became a household name known for his sultry, gravelly vocals. Some of his best songs alongside the orchestra included I'll Never Smile Again and Stardust. He started touring nationally, becoming renowned for his charismatic stage presence and emotional delivery. That laid the foundation for his future success as both a music and film icon. In 1942, he started out on a solo career. The 1940s saw Sinatra at his peak. He even sparked off a phenomenon called Sinatra Mania, where people would scream and swoon at his live performances. He became a cultural icon of the time, symbolizing the character of a romantic crooner. He had a massive impact on fashion and popular culture. His look was characteristic, a tailored suit and fedora, which became a trend among his fans. In the late 40s, he also took up a career as an actor. He was featured in films like Anchors Away and On the Town, where he starred alongside actors like Gene Kelly. In 1950, he was the winner of an Academy Award for his role in the film From Here to Eternity. In 1960, he founded the Reprise music label. In later years, he went on performing and touring the world to massive success. One of his best concert performances was his performance in Madison Square Garden in 1974. He died on May 14, 1998, leaving behind a legacy as one of the greatest vocalists in music history. Some of his best jazz albums included Songs for Swinging Lovers, In the Wee Small Hours, Only the Lonely, and more. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Frank Sinatra, his life and times and best hits. And now it's time for some trending festival news. Great news from the festival front. The Brisbane International Jazz Festival is underway. The festival started on October 11th and is going on until the 25th. And there's some great names from the lineup. From the Brooklyn's New York City Chillharmonic, Tin Men and the Telephone, Federico Casagrande, and more. The Brisbane International Jazz Festival is one of the leading festivals around the world. And this year's festival offers 35 local and international acts. Also, 2 jam sessions and a music workshop. 2 of the highlights from last week: Herbie Hancock, who's won 14 Grammy Awards for his music, and Esperanza Spalding, a 5-time Grammy Award-winning bassist, singer-songwriter, and composer. Here's some names from the lineup for next week: Jess Green, Lachlan McKenzie, Milton Mangau, and more. For more information, please visit www.bijf.com.au. So that was some trending festival news, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Frank Sinatra's best albums of all time. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Frank Sinatra, his life and times and best hits. And during this hour, we're going to be talking about more of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of the albums we're going to be talking about. The first one's called Only the Lonely, released in 1958. This is probably Frank Sinatra's greatest compilation of ballads. It was a follow-up to a similar album, Where Are You? The theme of the album is one of desolation and heartbreak. The album has a classical atmosphere, partly due to the big band orchestral backing. There's 2 highlights from Frank Sinatra's career here: Angel Eyes and One for My Baby, overall a compilation of late-night saloon songs. Sinatra at the Sands was released in 1966. This album offers us a glimpse into Frank Sinatra's performances in the 60s. It was his first live album release and was recorded during a concert in Las Vegas. Frank was collaborating alongside the Count Basie Orchestra during the concert, with Quincy Jones as conductor. There's a mix of jazz classics and lesser-heard pieces. The Basie Orchestra are also in top form. Overall, a very dynamic performance by Sinatra and the Basie Orchestra. An album called Sinatra Basie, a historic musical, first released in 1962. This was the first time Frank Sinatra and the Count Basie Orchestra collaborated in a performance. For both Basie's orchestra and Sinatra, the partnership opened up new avenues in the music arena. So that was a quick recap of what's coming up during this hour, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Josh and Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Josh and Silva. On this week's episode, Frank Sinatra, his life and times and best hits, and during this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. The first one's called Only the Lonely, released in 1958. In 1958, Frank Sinatra made what many consider his greatest album, Only the Lonely. The record peaked on the top of the charts for 2 years. The album contains some of his best songs of all time, including Blues in the Night and One for My Baby. Many of the songs have a melancholy theme to them. One feature of the songs is there's a lot of silence between the instrumentals and the vocals. Also, Nelson Riddle, his arranger, uses a large orchestral setting but makes it feel like an intimate combo in a small setting. The album expresses Sinatra's ability to express the complexities of sorrow. Also, there's many songs from the Great American Songbook in this album. Sinatra performs covers of songs like Bob Haggert's What's New, Sammy Khan's Guess I'll Hang My Tears Out to Dry, and Matt Denisser's Angel Eyes. Songs that have gone on to inspire other artists with their style and delivery. Even in the lesser-known hits like It's a Lonesome Old Town by Harry Tobias, it's a delivery that brings out the magic of the music. The next album is called Sinatra at the Sands, released in 1966. This was Sinatra's first ever live album. He'd been singing since 1948 and had never released a live album performance. And then in 1966, he teamed up with the Count Basie Orchestra for a historic live performance in Las Vegas. Frank had always held the Count Basie Orchestra in high regard, and this was one of their iconic collaborations. They had recorded before, but only in studio performances. Twice on the album Sinatra Basie, a historical first album, and it might as well be swing. They'd also performed in several concerts. So this album came at a revolutionary period in music history, when bands like the Beatles and the Beach Boys were changing the face of the music. And this was one such album, a spellbinding album that had the audience off the seats applauding. And this album is all about saloon singing. Sinatra is in tremendous form. The album starts off with the swinging Fly Me to the Moon, and on the ballads, he's very sensitive and intense. 2 highlights from the latter, One for My Baby and One More for the Road. He's accompanied by Bill Miller on piano as he transforms the Johnny Mercer hit into a despondent hymn. There's also a song that was played for the very first time ever on this album, The Shadow of Your Smile by Johnny Mandel. There's also highlights by the Count Basie Orchestra on their performances of the songs 1 O'Clock Jump and All of Me. So Sinatra at the Sands is a great live performance album and one of Sinatra's best. Another album called Sinatra Basie, a historic musical, first released in 1962. This one was another great collaboration album from Count Basie and Frank Sinatra. The Count Basie Orchestra was famous for their catchy rhythms, and supplemented by Sonny Payne's drumming, Sinatra takes us through some great classics. There's also some great solos from members of the Count Basie Orchestra, particularly the tenor saxophone playing of Frank Foster and Eric Dixon. A great compilation of swinging jazz songs covered by Sinatra's vocals. So that was some insight into more of Frank Sinatra's best albums of all time, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Josh and Silva. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Josh and Silva. On this week's episode, Frank Sinatra, his life and times and best hits, and now it's time for some trending album news. So over the last few years, society has globally witnessed several changes, from the pandemic to lockdown to the joy and vigor that came afterwards. Throughout those times, several musicians have converted those experiences into music. One such musician was Yulia Muzeelian. She started out sharing recordings of her music during the pandemic on social media. Many of her songs were themed around Argentine and folk music and inspired her to create a new album of her works. The album is called Strange Times and combines a series of original compositions that take us through the pandemic days as viewed through the eyes of the singer. The phrase strange times was used to denote the way the world was rocked during the pandemic, like few other times in history. And yet, despite the gloom and doom, with the pandemic came a sense of new possibilities. The songs were written during the course of the pandemic and take us from the beginning of the pandemic to the rebuilding of society in the present. Some of the pieces are dark and melancholy, reflecting the negative aspect of the pandemic. Others reflect the rising hope that the world experienced as things started looking brighter. So overall, this album is a chronological narrative of events during the pandemic, expressed with great compositional skills, sonic palettes and emotion. For more information, please visit www.yuliamuzeelian.com. So that was some trending album news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Josh and Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about more of Frank Sinatra's best albums of all time. Stay tuned.